Welcome to another episode of Xcel Outdoors. We are pumped for this episode today. We've got one of our pro staffers, Bjorn Christenson, with us. We're going to be dialoguing about river smallmouth fishing, both with the fly and conventional gear. With lots of good water this June, we are gearing up for what could be an excellent smallmouth season, even leading up into mid-fall here with the high water that we have. Xcel Outdoors will be having its annual Fishing Day event scheduled for Saturday, July 18th. This is a family event. Bring the kids, bring the wives, bring your boats. We'll be determining the destination for that trip this next week. So visit us at xceloutdoors.com. If you are signed up for our monthly blog update, you will get an email that speaks about the destination for that trip. So sit back and enjoy this episode. Welcome back to Xcel Outdoors. Bjorn, thanks for joining us today. It's a pleasure having you. Like I said, Bjorn is one of our pro staff members here in Wisconsin. Tell us about yourself, man.
Just grew up fishing, and I was always on Dad's hip, just following him around all over the place, fishing for trout and smallmouth bass up in Door County and
it's great.
All over central Wisconsin here. So hunting and fishing is something we've been pretty accustomed to.
Absolutely. And you've got two kids?
Yep. 10 and 12, Hayden and Elena, and they're both really interested in it too. So.
That's great. Well, we're excited today. We're going to be talking about river smallmouth bass. And Bjorn and I have been fishing rivers for many years. You know, a lot of it started with trout fishing, like smallmouth fishing when we were young. And we've got great water here in Wisconsin to do that, all over the Midwest. To be exact. What are we looking for? You know, when we get to a river, that doesn't mean we're necessarily going to catch fish.
Right.
You know, obviously there's structure, there's current. What are some key things that stand out to you, Bjorn, on what we're looking for?
Yeah, my biggest thing is structure. These smallmouth bass in particular, I think they're really sensitive to light, and they're really cautious of predators as well. So they're always hanging around logs or undercut banks, or if there's heavy riffles flowing through that they can hide under that current, so they're not just getting spotted from above from predators.
And you and I have fished a lot of brown trout over the years. Would you say that there's a lot of similarities in the way that they're in the water, using structure to hide and ambush and things like that?
Completely agree.
Yeah, and a lot of these fish are very territorial, a lot like brown trout. Smallmouth spend the majority of their life in a, maybe 100-yard section of river. That's just how they are. They feed that way. And so Bjorn's going to give us a great overview of conventional gear that you guys can use for smallmouth. He's going to talk about rods, maybe some line, and some lures, things like that he's going to show you here in our next segment.
So with smallmouth bass fishing in Wisconsin here, like we like to do it in rivers, a lot of times what we're encountering for water clarity is pretty clear water to semi-clear water. They can see quite a ways. So my favorite rig, spinning rig for this is a 6-foot rod. You could probably go anywhere to an 8.5 foot if you wanted to, but medium action, medium light, is the best action, I think, for fishing rods. Good reel with good drag. These bigger fish always seem to take one really good run, and if you don't have a drag set, you're going to break most of them off. So you got to have good drag. I like using the 8-pound test monofilament line. You could probably go up to 10 or down to 6 depending on clarity and conditions, how high the water is, but I think 8 is pretty standard. You can't go wrong with that. And as far as lures go, I'd say there's really 3 presentations that work best for river smallmouth. You have your stationary presentations where it'd be midday, or the fish are just a little finicky and they aren't biting as well. And I'd recommend a tube jig like this. Or if you like using bait, I've had good success with 3-way swivel, a barrel, and a bell sinker, and just a hook about 2 feet back that holds the minnow. And midday, when the fish are really sluggish or the sun's bright and maybe an inner tuber or a kayaker has gone through and spooked some of the fish, that can be some of the best ways to catch fish that are just a little shy. My favorite time is early, is low light conditions, so early morning or at dusk. The fish just seem to be a lot more aggressive. They come up out of those hiding spots that they've been in all day and tend to feed in shallower riffles, and will eat baits with a lot more regularity, and you just catch a lot more fish early and late in the day. One of those lures that I like to use at that point is a suspending Rapala. Good action. It just seems to trigger a lot of fish. Or you can go with a topwater bait like a buzz bait, or plugs work really good. Hula poppers, stuff like that. They seem to trigger a lot of strikes. So with the presentation and how you want to fish these lures targeting these smallmouth in rivers, is if they're in a feeding state of mind, they're going to want a faster moving lure. A lot of times, if you can make a really accurate cast right at the bank and get it as close to shore as possible, you're going to get a reaction strike out of these fish where they almost are surprised by it and they just hit it because it's like, what is this big piece of meat coming in my domain here? So that's one of the best ways you're going to get the most strikes. But then as the sun gets higher in the sky during the day and it's more midday, you're going to have to slow down, because just casting spinner baits right up on shore and ripping them through there, these fish aren't as aggressive midday. So you got to slow down. You're going to have to twitch it on the bottom. I let that tube jig sink right down to the bottom, and a lot of times you can see the bass come right up to it. You're watching them. It's a visual thing, so it's pretty neat to watch, but it can be frustrating as well if they don't take. But a lot of times just a little bit of action, real slow, will get them midday. When you're using the minnow presentation, I just like to slip in the hole. So I start at the top of the hole and anchor there and fish that off the back of the canoe. And then as I catch fish or not finding fish, I'll anchor 15 feet down until I've fished my way through the pool. And that's a really slow presentation that way too, with the sinker just sitting on the bottom, and then you letting the minnow do the work. The bass are hunkered down low on the bottom, and the minnow's just basically swimming around in their face. So, but then after in the afternoon and getting into evening, low light conditions again, these bass come and they'll be cruising in 1 foot deep riffles looking for crayfish and minnows. They're usually in schools, so if you catch one, you catch a couple, or even I've caught up to 10 off one riffle. And they're hunting together, so they're going to be real aggressive, and you can rip baits through there pretty fast and cover some ground and find those feeding fish.
Well, thanks, Bjorn, for a great overview. That was awesome. And you mentioned it a few times. One of the neat things about river smallmouth fishing here is you don't need a boat. We can just show up, or if you have a kayak or a canoe, you can access a lot of water here, even in northeastern Wisconsin, and have a lot of success. So that was great for conventional. We're going to segment into an overview that I'm going to do with fly fishing. The gear that we use for fly fishing, I'm going to talk about flies, tackle, things that we do from basically early May through October. And yeah, so stay tuned. Welcome back to Xcel Outdoors. Thanks, Bjorn, for that great segment on conventional gear for river smallmouth. I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit now about what I like to use in the fly fishing realm. And first, you need a rod. You need a rod and reel and a line. And for most anglers here in Wisconsin, we're going to look at a 9-foot, 8-weight, 4-piece rod. It's just nice for travel. A reel to match that, that's balanced, and a floating, heavy front taper line, meaning the last 20 to 26 feet of that fly line is a front tapered, heavy floating line because you're throwing bigger flies in windy conditions sometimes, and you need to be able to have a strong, big front taper line to do that. And there's a lot of good companies out there. My favorite is Scientific Anglers for making a big fly line called a Big Magnum Big Fly line that you can pick up at Tight Lines in De Pere, Wisconsin. I'm going to walk you through what I like to use from basically fly line to a leader to the tippet that I use for these fish. Now I'm going to use an 8 or 9 foot, 10 or 12 pound leader. You can buy these in a single pack or in a multiple pack, 3-pack, 2-pack, whatever you want to do. I like to use that 8 pounds and up. If you're fishing small poppers, come August, maybe you can get away with 6 pounds on your tippet. Maxima, I like this Chameleon. This Chameleon Maxima is great. This is an 8 pound. I have spools of 8, 10, and 12 pound in my boat. I do have some 6, as well as some fluorocarbon, just to get really thin when you're throwing those smaller poppers or ants or beetle patterns for fish. Let's transition into flies that we're going to be using for smallmouth, and we'll start from basically pre-spawn all the way up to fall. What I like to use early season, there's 2 different flies. These are going to be subsurface flies, flies that sink. All right, and there's a variety of flies that we can use. These are Clouser minnows here. Clouser minnows are designed to sink, hook up. They've tied with lead or tungsten eyes, a lot of flash, a lot of movement in the water. A lot of our smallmouth waters have crayfish in them, and so we want to target fish that are eating on the bottom when that water temp is a little lower. So I tie a variety of Clousers. A really neat pattern that came out of Wisconsin here is from Tim Landwehr. He ties a fly called the Timmy's Muppet. This is a great crayfish pattern. I've caught a lot of fish with this pattern over the years, and it's another pattern that's going to ride hook up with those dumbbell eyes down. And you're going to be fishing slower pools, even some riffle water if the fish are moving in there for feeding lanes. Sinking flies are really, really nice to have. And I'll like trout, I'm going to start on the bottom of the river and work my way up throughout the day. If I see fish kind of a little bit higher in the water column, I'm going to switch to some bait fish patterns. And my favorite is Bill Murdich's Murdich minnow. This fly, you guys, have caught more smallmouth, I think, than any other fly I've ever used. This fly is phenomenal. The action and the way that it's tied is amazing. And this fly, with its bucktail underbody and some synthetic top fibers, some Flashabou, crystal flash, things like that, is going to allow this fly to dance in the water. And as you work this fly, you want it to resemble a dying baitfish or a fleeting baitfish. Another great fly, this is a variation of a fly called the Bardo minnow. Kind of same mentality of baitfish, a little bit bigger profile. Now you can tie this in blacks, in silvers. This is a perch pattern, which in early season I have done great with. And it's phenomenal. It's heavy duty. Pike will eat this. And this fly stays its shape and casts a great silhouette on those days where fish are looking to eat really good. So I use that pretty much all year round. I mean, at least in the smallmouth season from May till October. But as things progress and the water temp's warm, the water drops, fish are going to be looking on top. I'll use a fly like a Dahlberg diver. This is a chartreuse Dahlberg tied out of deer hair, rabbit strip. You can use crystal flash. Flashabou is probably the best because of the flow that it gets in the current. Tie these in yellow and chartreuse. The yellow color, bright yellow, is actually my favorite, but I really like this chartreuse. It's got a flat bottom, and it's got a really nice coned head where you can move a lot of water. It's good action. You'll get a lot of pike on this fly in early season as well. Moving to my favorite time of year for smallmouth, and that's top water. Using poppers such as this boogle bug here in a yellow or a bright yellow. We've got them in blues and blacks and greens. You know, I like the brighter colors, the yellows, and they make a really nice blue, which is nice. If you want a lower profile fly, this little guy right here is phenomenal. All it is foam and rubber legs, tied by a guide here in Wisconsin. His name is Charlie Petit up at Tight Lines Fly Fishing Company. And this is just a really standard fly. As you can see, those rubber legs are wiggling all over the place, and the fish see that from bottom up, and sometimes they'll eat it like a trout, really soft takes, which is really fun. And definitely in our river systems, we get a lot of beetles and ants. This is a great just parachute ant, highly visible. You could use that 6-pound mono or fluorocarbon when fishing this fly. Once again, it's got rubber legs, but a nice parachute post here so you can see it if you're making 30, 40-foot casts for rising smallmouth. So that's just kind of a simple breakdown of what I like to use. I always like to have hemostats in the boat with me. It's just a pair of Ross hemostats here for getting flies out, for cutting. Oftentimes in early season you get a lot of pike, so I like to use steel leaders. This thing can cut through like those leaders. Like we talked about earlier, bass are water temperature fanatics, and so having a thermometer, a stream thermometer that you can dip into the water and see where you're at is going to allow you to fish more consistently, pick up more fish based on where they're going to be in the water column throughout the day. So that's just my general overview for on the fly fishing for smallmouth bass. Next month we'll be with Captain Bob Doctor from Winnebago Sport Fishing Charters, and we're going to be on the big lake there on Winnebago, probably doing some walleye fishing, maybe even some bass fishing. So that'll be coming up here in July. We will have a segment on getting ready for the bow season. It's not too far away. Here are June's photos in our St. Croix Mojo Bass Rod Contest. Now remember, you have to have an Xcel Outdoors hat on to qualify to win a Mojo Bass rod by St. Croix Rods. We will be giving that rod away at the end of August. So please submit your photo to adudek, D-U-D-E-K, at appletonalliance.org. Thanks again for tuning in, and remember, God loves you and has a plan for your life.